Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week here with Dr. Lisle and myself, Gustavo Tolosa. We are very far away from each other. Dr. Lisle is in California, and I'm in Argentina, returning to the States tomorrow. And we have a question and answer session today. But before that, just want to formally welcome you, Dr. Lisle. How are you doing
Oh,
today?
great to be back, Gustavo.
It's always nice to see you here with us. People are very excited and they turn in questions. The way we're going to do this is people have taken time to email questions at webinar@drmcdougall.com. So we want to honor those questions. I will also be reading the chat here so that I can choose some questions from the chat from our live audience. But I want to make sure that the people that have sent questions, we can also get them answered. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Very good. So, are we ready, Dr. Lyle?
We're ready.
Okay, here we go. So, someone sent a question saying, what is the best way to safely gain weight after a diagnosis of anorexia without turning into a binge monster who just wants to eat everything? It's very hard to find a good balance of eating the right amount without overeating. Does he have any helpful tips? What kind of foods would be the best to eat, and how much does he recommend?
You just want to eat a normal McDougall diet is what you want to do. And sometimes something that we don't normally recommend, it would be for them to actually have a reasonable calorie count that they're aiming for, just in some general area. So remember that women on average burn about 1,900 calories a day. So someone who has been dealing with anorexia, we're not sure. Everybody's different. It depends upon if the person is no longer underweight, but they are at normal weight and they're worried about gaining too much weight. We would want them on a diet, a balanced McDougall diet that would hit somewhere in that range of 1,900 to 2,000 calories a day, and we would just see how that goes. And so they would. This is going to be one of these unusual instances where we're actually going to want things fairly well structured, so that a person is eating a pretty consistent amount from day to day and have their meals planned like that. The reason why we would do this and not do it for other people is that people struggling with anorexia very often will systematically undereat, and they will feel like they should eat less just because they're essentially anxious about gaining weight. So we need to have them sort of holding themselves accountable for eating a reasonable amount of food. So that's how we do that. But there isn't a type of food that you're trying to aim towards other than a starch-based whole plant foods diet. So the same things that we would tell anybody else.
Very good. Well, thank you, Dr. Lyle. We have someone that has seen one of I think we did 2 webinars about panic attacks at one point. And
Mhm.
this person says, Dr. Lyle has discussed how to deal with panic attacks in a previous webinar. Could he talk about dealing with anxiety using the buffer zone approach to stress management?
Okay, yeah. So I wrote an article about this 20 years ago in Health Science magazine, and so I called this the buffer zone approach to stress management. The what a useful thing to understand is a huge amount of anxiety and stress comes about from time pressure. It's not all of it, but it is a great deal. Particularly, sometimes we're looking at social conflict is driving anxiety and stress, but very often a major factor in anxiety and stress in a person's life is time pressure. And so that time pressure has usually a few elements to it. Very often there's an agreeable, conscientious personality that has essentially got themselves overburdened and overcommitted because other people are essentially seeing that that person is valuable and useful, and they recruit them and essentially socially pressure them into putting their agenda, on that person's list. And then what happens is that our victim is now overburdened. Now they're overcommitted. And so as a result, they're under a lot of time pressure. And that time pressure is what drives the anxiety and the stress. So the buffer zone approach is the notion that we're always looking out for essentially protecting our time. And we put extra space in whatever it is that we can, and we defend that very, very cleverly. And so, for example, let's suppose that a typical anxious, conscientious, agreeable person would agree to do one more thing and try to cram that in before they put the kid in the car or to get to the dentist, or to put themselves in the car to get to the dentist. They're going to do just one more thing. And now what happens is they are fighting traffic and stressed out over making every light all the way to the dentist's office. So for 25 minutes in the car, they are sweating bullets because they're worried about, that they're watching the clock and they're late. And they're not late, but they're only 1 minute to spare. So this is classic of how it is that people run into a lifestyle where they're under a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety. So what we need to do is we need to essentially make it so that we don't have 25 minutes to get to the dentist. We've got 35 minutes to get to the dentist. And in order to do that, we have to do less and be ready to hop in the car early. And I'm just using this, both literally and metaphorically. The notion is in your life, we want to have buffer zones associated with our time pressure. So in some stress management gurus thinking, what they do is they say, well, make a list of everything you're going to do today and then cut it in half, because that's what actually really happens. I don't know that you can get yourself to do that usually. In other words, if you think it's going to take half an hour and you schedule it for half an hour, that's a good way to put yourself under a lot of time pressure because it's probably going to be 42 minutes. So we need to look along your life and to essentially not commit to too many things so that we have a buffer zone with respect to our time all over the place. And this will reduce our anxiety. And people will say, oh, I just can't do this. You know what I mean? I just have so much to do. At which point, what I think about is I go back to the Stone Age and I think, well, what did they have to do? They got up in the morning and they had to go get food, and they gossiped with everybody about who was sleeping with whom, and they watched their children and made sure that they didn't get eaten by wolves. And then they cooked food at the end of the day and they ate it and then went to sleep. There wasn't any time pressure. All right. So when we look at our lives and we see time pressure, I want you to get tough as you try to examine, why is it that we're under so much time pressure? What are we trying to accomplish? What goals are we trying to reach so feverishly by what deadline? And let's see whether or not if we can move some of those deadlines out by 20 or 30%. And so I shot a video that's on my website called Success Forces that tells the story of how it is that we push back against the expectations of other people and how we manage that so that we don't wind up under time pressure. And so anyway, that the buffer zone approach is most specifically attached to time pressure as being the main issue that drives a lot of people's stress and anxiety. And so for example, if people go to my website, they will find that if they are looking to schedule an appointment, they are in 1.5 hour blocks. There's a reason for this, okay? So if people schedule a half an hour, I have 1.5 hours to get it done. If they schedule an hour, I have an hour and a half to get it done. You will not see my appointment book scheduled hour to hour to hour. That to me is like a living death. That way, if I'm talking to somebody and I need to go 7 minutes over, I can't do it, right? If we're in the middle of something important because I've got somebody else coming on the line, in a few minutes and I've got to hang up. Not going to live life that way. So I set that up specifically so that my whole day feels relaxed. And when I talk to people, I feel relaxed and I'm not having to worry about the clock. Okay. And so we'll just go ahead and be a little bit less efficient and a whole lot happier. And that goes for everything. So that's a way to try to look at how to organize your life. Push back, do less. So often, less is more.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Thank you, Dr. Lisle.
Okay.
So it seems that weekends are a time when people are relaxed and not thinking so much about goals sometimes. So someone is asking here in the chat, saying, Dr. Lisle, I'm struggling on the weekends with the pleasure trap. Any suggestions?
No. The pleasure trap is going to be an omnipresent force in your life. It just is. It's trying to, what it is it's your instincts interacting with opportunity. And so those instincts are looking for the opportunity of having things to be spectacularly good, easy, etc. And that's what the pleasure trap is. So this is all about managing your environment in a way to keep yourself, essentially have yourself organized so that what you are doing and how it is that you're living steers you as clear of the pleasure trap as possible. That's all you can do. This is why Chef AJ is fanatical about having her environment really clean with respect to food, and have all of it is that her thinking about where it is that she's going to eat and who she's going to eat with and what she's going to eat. It's all organized in advance to the point where she's not tempted. Okay, and so that's how she does it. The also keeping good organization, having things very easy, so that it comes easily for you to always have healthy food around. That's what all these people that are exceptional at this, make it a point to have things well organized and particularly simple. Jeff Novick has convinced me over the years that a super important key to healthy living is to have it really repetitive and simple, really well organized. He's a master at this. And so therefore the weekends don't look any different than the week when it comes to the food. We're doing exactly the same things that we do all week. It's repetitive and it's simple and it's good. That's what we try to do. So if we do some celebratory stuff on the weekend, then have it be stereotypical of one night, like Saturday night or something. Let's not have it be the whole weekend. Let's have that weekend be, with respect to food, a fairly seamless integration with everything else that you do.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Lisle. And could you just mention what your website is, a little bit about how to schedule a appointment, and also some of your free resources that you have there? Just do a little informational.
Okay. It's called esteemdynamics.com. And on that website, there's a bunch of free videos, and there's a bunch of little audios that I have done just with advice on various topics. They only take usually about 5 minutes a piece or 3 minutes, where I'm just sort of answering questions that a lot of people have asked me about how to manage different kinds of social problems or decision making. And then also, if people want to sign up to do a one-on-one consult with me, they can do that on the website. It's pretty simple to do.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so one of the people that sent us a question via email asks, can antidepressants cause sugar cravings and weight gain?
I wouldn't know. Antidepressants are very disruptive to neurochemistry. And so I wouldn't be surprised if in any given case that they could cause all kinds of things. So I don't know that, I mean, certain antidepressants I think have been associated with weight gain, some of them with weight loss, some of them with very morbid thoughts. Other ones might be with respect to some kind of cravings. In other words, what you're looking at is you're looking at pretty significant disruption of neurochemistry. And so that's why I personally don't recommend these things. Now, remember that I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a, quote, real doctor. So therefore, in theory, I can have an opinion about these things, but I cannot guide you to go off of them, or I couldn't prescribe them for you or anything like that, because I'm not that kind of doctor. What I like people to do, if they have been prescribed antidepressants or any kind of psychotropic medication of any kind, I suggest that they take the trouble to read Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker. The reason why I recommend this book is that I feel like this is you're putting your lives in, or you're putting your brain in the hands of people that you are just trusting. And so the question is whether or not they are trustworthy, and whether or not this is a responsible thing to do. And I don't want anybody ever taking my word for anything. I want them to be informed themselves. And this is a hard thing to do because we're used to relying on experts, particularly when things get complicated. But this is one of those times where if you have the intelligence, and almost anybody that I've ever run into in the McDougall arena has the intelligence to read Robert Whitaker's book. Unfortunately, there are people in the world that don't have the intelligence to read a moderately difficult book. And so they have to rely on experts. And unfortunately, I believe those experts are misinformed about these medications. I believe these medications are very seriously problematic. At the end of reading Mr. Whitaker's book, I really couldn't see, no way would I see ever the routine value of them. I believe I've seen cases where people were better off with medications for something very, very unusual and specific, like, I don't know, restless leg syndrome or something like this. In other words, there are people that have benefited from psychiatric medications, but usually not because it's solving the problem that it is generally prescribed for, but because they have a particular quirk and a particular medication helps that particular quirk. That I have seen. But as a general routine for trying to solve some of the emotional, psychological problems that people try to solve with these things, I would suggest that you read Mr. Whitaker's book before you let another year go by with respect to anything like this. Now, remember also, and to underscore something very heavily, and that is that Mr. Whitaker explains that if anybody ever chooses to go off of psychiatric medications, they should do so extremely slowly relative to what is typically prescribed or recommended. And I believe he recommends Dr. Peter Bregin's book called Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal, which will also emphasize how slowly this should go. If you read Mr. Whitaker's book, you will see why the slow speed is very, very important concept. So anyway, that's my take on psychiatric medications. Like I said, be an informed consumer and then make your own decision. And I think many people would make a decision that would be in contradiction to what their doctor would think would be in their best interest.
All right, very good, thank you. A question about a strategy or strategies, Dr. Lisle. Do you have any type of strategies to prevent you from eating a pleasure trap food in that short time you mentally choose to eat the food and when it touches your lips? Is there something that in that those seconds?
Turns out I have this magic pill that I've been working on for years. is $50 a pill. And it turns out that when you really want to eat a big chunk of Reese's peanut butter cups, if you take one of Dr. Lisle's magic pills, it takes care of it.
It quite instantaneous. Well, I think it should be more than just $50. You can definitely charge like 5,000.
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of people would buy it right now.
I think that what we want to do is I have one of my rules for willpower, and I have a certain a set of 4 rules for willpower. That one of the rules for willpower is that if you're about to eat some junk, you have to eat something healthy first. And so right about the time when you're about to grab for something, you have a simple rule that says, I have to eat something healthy before I eat this. So you go ahead. There it is. There's a donut right there on the counter, but there's also a banana over there in the little bowl, okay, or an apple. It's like, well, there's the rule right there. So after you eat that apple, then if that donut is such a good idea, go ahead and claim the donut so that nobody else can get it. But you must eat the apple first. That's the idea. So we're trying to put a simple rule in here. There's a little bit, there's some thought that goes into this rule. I don't expect any strategy to work all the time. That's not the point of strategies. The point of strategies is that they improve your odds. So we want to have some basic strategies that we use over and over again, just because they increase our batting average. It's not that we're ever going to be perfect. If you want to be perfect, then visit people like Alan Goldhammer, Jeff Novick, or Chef AJ, or people like this. These are these strange, odd, bizarre humans. You've met them all, Gustavo. You know they're all weird. So good for them. Okay, we the normal people are going to have to struggle, and that's just the way it is. And so that means what we need strategies. And so this type of simple strategy, you've got to eat something healthy first. This is just a way to check you a little bit, to maybe reduce this transgression by 50%. That's all that we're after. I had a person talk to me this week that gets a lot of social pressure from family, and so when this person goes out to eat, there's a lot of pressure to join with the group and eat a bunch of rich food. Boy, I actually had 2 people. I'm thinking I got 2 completely different people this week had a similar, very similar situation. And in both cases, what I told them is, eat something substantial before you go. So have a baked potato before you ever go to dinner or go over to the relative's house, or have a bowl of rice or whatever it is. In other words, already be 50% of the way full. You don't have to be all the way full, but be 50%. So that when you go out to dinner and you're eating something that's marginal, you're not really that into it, and you're not going to go off the rails. And the same thing is true if you go over to the relative's house. You can be non-insulting and do some things that you wouldn't normally want to have, but you're not going to have that much of it, and you're not going to be heroically, only eating a little bit of it. No, the truth is you only want a little bit of it because we're already halfway full. So these are strategies to kind of reduce down the impact of the pleasure trap and its allure. Eat something healthy first.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Lisle. So we have someone who wrote saying that she's been on healing stage 4 breast cancer, and have been vegan for about a year, low-fat vegan since February of this year. Mm-hmm. And the question says, how does one focus on and make the depth of change necessary when there are many fronts on which change is needed? And then she goes on to say, for example, I would benefit from not only learning the starch-based diet and nutrition information, but also from a daily walk, moderate exercise, regular meal times, earlier bedtimes, etc., etc. And then she says, yikes, it gets overwhelming and I end up in circles sometimes. Then I end up snacking or grabbing something at hand rather than preparing a proper meal, or I skip a meal, etc. Thanks so much for any suggestions you might have as to how to focus my efforts so that I can move healthily forward instead of spinning in circles.
Yeah, I think you have to have a simple check sheet for your life, and so it's actually this person is obviously under a lot of challenge, and so and there's many whatever it is that she's dealing with. She's probably dealing with a lot of advice coming in from other people, probably has doctor's appointments. In other words, what we're seeing is a great deal of time pressure. And so this is going to be not easy to do. There's a lot to juggle. I would say that the simple check sheet, though, is that, this is a page out of Dr. Wayne Dyer, the late Dr. Wayne Dyer, had many good ideas in his life. And one of them in one of his early books was called First Be a Good Animal. And so this is where he meant, eat healthy. And when you feel, hungry, and if you don't feel hungry, don't eat, and get plenty of sleep and exercise, etc. He was just he was talking what in naturopathic medicine we call the first therapeutic order. In other words, let's make sure we do the very important things right, and we do them first. So I understand that she's got a lot of challenges and a lot of fear and a lot of swirling conflicts about how to best use her time. But what we must do is wanting to do is the first thing we want to do is leverage our efforts to support your better, longer life. And so the most important thing we're going to do is going to be diet. And then sleep is going to be next. And exercise is going to be reasonably important. And getting some sunshine is going to be important too. And we're going to want to do those things. Really, we would do those before we would do anything else. So if you have to make a living, then we have to do that. And we're going to have to put that in there. But Alan Goldhammer has a way of looking at this that people find amusing, but he's got fascinating ways of describing things in a way that really helps us get our priorities. He will tell people, well, after you've eaten healthfully, and after you've gotten plenty of sleep, and after you've exercised, and after you've gotten some sunshine, after all that has taken place, if you have any time left over to work, then you can go to work. Okay? The very interesting way of looking at things. So whatever else those pressures are, everything has to come in line after we take care of these major issues. And that's how, that's the only way I know to help this person, because you need to make, I would recommend the basic Jeff Novick strategy of keeping your diet very simple and have it repetitive. That's how we're going to take care of the diet, okay? Because we're not going to have to be putting a bunch of complicated things together. We're going to be doing the same things over and over again, buying the same things over and over again, and they're going to be ripening up in a nice daily arc, where the peaches are going to be coming online, the avocados are going to be coming online in a row. And so we're going to have this conveyor belt of healthy food, and we're going to go to bed on time, the same time every night. We're going to sleep deeply. We will have exercised that day. It doesn't take that long to exercise. And so we're going to do this over and over again, because if we do this and we're well rested and well fed, well exercised, and we've gotten sunshine, then we have a chance to beat this cancer. We have a chance to put it into a stalemate where your body literally can stop it from progressing, and that you get to live out the length of your life. That's what we need to do. And to leave 10% of that on the table, to compromise any of that by 10%, by not sleeping enough, 4 nights out of 7, by only exercising 2 or 3 days a week, by slipping a lot on the diet all over the place. These are expensive compromises, and I would encourage anyone that is facing a challenge that vast to make sure that we have Alan's attitude. You eat properly, you exercise, you sleep, you get some sunshine. If there's any time left over for anything else, that's what they get.
Excellent. Thank you. Someone is typing here a question about how is the ego trap different from the pleasure trap?
Yes. Okay. The pleasure trap is, let me try to do this. Pleasure trap is about sensory data. It's about your senses. It's about your smell, taste, vision, even touch, okay, or hearing. So the pleasure trap is about what we're going to call supernormal stimuli. It's stimulation that was never characteristic of our Stone Age ancestors, and we have now created sensory potentials, whether it's food or drugs or music. We have created things that are extraordinary. And as a result of that, it draws the attention of the nervous system and motivates the creature to interact with whatever that is. So you are looking at the pleasure trap when all you see is a bent head of a teenager as they're feverishly working their device of, I don't know, World of Warcraft 5, and so we can't get them to do anything else. You're looking at the pleasure trap. Now, how destructive of a pleasure trap is it? Not very. But the point is, that's what you're watching. You're watching that the person's attention and motivation has been drawn in by a stimulus that is not normal. That's what cookies and candy and tofutti cuties are. And that's what cigarettes and alcohol and heroin are, is they are supernormal stimuli that the pleasure of, I call it the pleasure trap because that's the most widespread manifestation of it. The World of Warcraft isn't exactly pleasurable, but it's deeply engaging. Pornography would be a potential pleasure trap for many people. So this is going to be gambling is also a pleasure trap. Turns out that when gambling addicts observe something that gets almost successful, they get a dopamine hit out of it. In other words, they feel like they were almost successful and they're highly motivated to continue. Whereas people that are not gambling addicts don't have that reaction. In other words, when something is almost successful, they're disappointed and disgusted and they want to get away from it. It's fascinating individual differences in psychology that are genetic in origin, that have extraordinarily slight differences in interpretation from a gambling event is the difference between a person being a pathological gambler and somebody not being. Okay, so same thing is true with alcohol. So very, very subtle differences in genetics is the difference between someone being an alcoholic and someone not being an alcoholic. So, but the pleasure trap is all about supernormal stimuli and how supernormal stimuli tickle and entice the nervous system into being motivated to seek and interact with a stimulus that is not natural. So they're the heart of an addictive process is what they are. Now, the ego trap is completely different. The ego trap is my description of what happens to people when the expectations for their performance are higher than they think that they can do. So when people, in other words, they have too much ego or too much status to lose because the expectations have been put too high. So if you think about a young person that is being told by their parents or by their school that they have great genius or great abilities and that we expect big things of you, the individual themselves may not trust that this is true. And so they may not think that they can live up to those expectations. And as a result, what will happen is they are motivated to not try. And they are motivated to make it very publicly clear that they are not trying. So as a result of not trying, they will not succeed. But the inference that comes from the social environment can be, but had you tried, you could have succeeded. And as long as the person continues to hear that kind of feedback, then they are continually motivated to not try. So this is a way that they save their status or their esteem, i.e. their ego. So they save their status. They maintain it to some degree by virtue of never having attempted the challenge. So this is this dynamic, which seems like a possibly rare or tragic dynamic, is actually a dynamic that I see routinely. I see it in manifestations all over human psychology, and it's a widespread motivational trap. Let me give you an example. I actually believe that it is the soft underbelly of addictive process that is essentially almost never discussed because has not been clearly identified. If you have an individual that is a bright, capable person that is struggling with an alcohol problem, or for example, let's go a little closer to home. Let's suppose you've got a bright, capable person that is struggling with a weight problem. So let's suppose this person is a bright, capable, conscientious individual and they're 50 or 60 pounds overweight. Their social environment says, Susie, you're too smart. You should just push yourself away from the table. So what we see now is that the person actually has expectations because of who it is that they are characterologically, that the outside world believes that they should be able to beat this problem. And the outside world is tapping their foot, irritated and a little disgusted that the person is not, in fact, accomplishing this goal. However, the person's self does not know that they can accomplish the goal. The reason why is that they have secretly tried 42 times to try to lose weight, or 142 times, and they've not been successful. They've gone on a diet for 3 days and then they've crashed. Okay. They've gone on a diet for 6 days and then they've crashed. They've gone on a diet for 2 weeks and then they crashed. And, they lost 14 pounds and then they gained it all back and then some. So the point is that they've had very many failures about this. And so they no longer actually believe that they could be successful. However, they are aware that other people believe that other people think that they could be successful. So as a result, we have the ego trap. And what the ego trap tells the person is, don't try. And make it very clear to other individuals that you are not trying. And so what it sets up is a process of procrastination, where the person essentially tells the social world, yes, I know there's a problem, and yes, I know I'm supposed to deal with this, and of course I could deal with it, but I can't do it until after I get this big project at work done. I can't do it until after this or that happens. I can't do it till after the first of the year. I'm just going to get through the holidays and then I'm going to get to it. So what we see is an endless cycle of procrastination and delay. And this is characteristic of the ego trap. So this is how it works. So the ego trap, there's a further iteration of the ego trap, and that is that the person themselves, their internal audience, also expects them to be more successful than the individual themselves believes they could be. And your internal audience is essentially a separate psychological entity. It's as if it's other people that are watching you. This is a characteristic of human psychology. This goes by the name of internal critic in cognitive therapy. It goes by the name of superego in Freudian psychology. It goes by the name of consciousness and self-consciousness throughout the history of philosophy. I have termed it the internal audience, and that is because I believe they watch. And so the internal audience can essentially have derived its opinion of the individual from listening to the social world. And so the internal audience believes that the individual can do this if they would only apply themselves, but the individual themselves is not confident that they could. So they will actually procrastinate right in front of their own internal audience. So they will display to their own internal audience that they are not trying, and they will eat that chocolate eclair right in front of their internal audience and say, see, I'm not trying yet. Okay. I will get to it. I'll get to it soon, but not yet. Okay. This is a really rough motivational dilemma. And this is what I call the ego trap. The motivational system is trapped into procrastinating and self-destructing in order to maintain the veneer or the status that the person could be capable of doing whatever it is that they are expected to be able to do, whether it's put down the bottle or push away from the table and eat less and lose weight, or whether or not it's to write the great American novel. Whatever it is that the expectations are, the person feels intimidated by reaching the expectations of others or their internal self, and they therefore procrastinate and fiddle and sabotage. Okay, now, the solution to this is what I call micro goals. It's to actually not set goals of success for the behavior, but set daily goals for micro successes of the little tiny fundamentals that are associated with long-term success in this domain. So I have, with respect to weight loss, I've delineated this out carefully in the webinar that we did last fall called The Slow Fast Way. That was in September of 2017. So I take people through this very careful discussion of how the ego trap works and how it is that we essentially deactivate the ego trap by setting micro goals, which I call starch targets. But this very same process is the same process of deactivating the ego trap in any dimension of life. So whether it's the great American novel, alcoholism, or the kid that's supposed to be a star, quarterback or star poet in their school or anything else under the sun. Whenever we observe people that are procrastinating and bitter and self-destructive and unhappy, they're in a trap. And the trap that they're in is the ego trap. And this trap is obviously very, very different than the pleasure trap. One last comment I'll make on this, and that is that cruelly, we have to understand that the pleasure trap is not a natural trap. Pleasure trap is man-made, totally not anything that human beings were ever supposed to deal with. The ego trap is not man-made. The ego trap is a natural phenomenon that arises out of human beings running cost-benefit analysis on whether or not it's reasonable to attack some potential goal that other people think that we can do, but we're not sure that we can. And so the ego trap is a natural cost-benefit dilemma that people have to face. However, it's my analysis that the interaction between the ego trap and the pleasure trap is among the most devastating motivational crises that human beings can ever experience. The pleasure trap is not supposed to be here. So you can imagine what it's like if you're 50 pounds overweight and you are highly intelligent, highly capable, and highly conscientious individual, but people around you don't have a weight problem by virtue of their genetics, not by virtue of their superior behavior. They're just genetically different. And so they look at you and they have discussed, and they also have complete confidence that if you just push yourself away from the table and use some self-discipline that you obviously have, that you shouldn't have this problem. Why are you being so self-indulgent? Okay. Now, the individual themselves has no such confidence that they could beat this problem because they've tried to beat the problem 142 times and they have failed. And so they are facing a devastating opportunity for self-indulgence called the pleasure trap. Their slender friends are absolutely in the pleasure trap and don't know it, and have no way they have any superhuman self-discipline at all. And so as a result, what happens is that the individual who's struggling with the weight problem, literally the only way out would be to find this method of doing things, and then get out of the pleasure trap and eat a healthy plant-based diet. That's the solution to get out. But that solution is not trivial. That solution is extremely difficult to execute. Now, it isn't that it can't be done, but it takes learning and discipline and knowledge and experimentation and social engineering. It takes a lot to do this. And so as a result, it's no surprise that people stumble along the way. And so what will happen is we can see that also, even within our own realm, very often the bar will be set too high. So some of my good friends are in exhorting people to try to make positive changes can themselves get the bar too high for people. And people expect that they need to be perfect in order to succeed. You do not. You do not need to be perfect in order to succeed. You need to be good. Okay? You need to execute consistently well, but you don't have to be perfect. And so what we're going to find, however, is that when we slip and indulge, we actually fire up the pleasure trap a little hotter. So we see that the ego trap and the pleasure trap are actually opponent processes, that when we relax one of them, the other one becomes more intense. Okay? So this means that it's literally like a Chinese finger trap. You try to get out and it actually grabs you harder. So this is why the solution to the trap is somewhere in the middle. It is a very good job with respect to your diet, good enough that you maintain a high sensitivity palate to healthy food, but not so high that the trap is so great that you get intimidated by perfection. And then when you are not perfect, you kick the table over and say, I can't do it. Okay. So this is a great question that somebody asked, and I know I went on at length with respect to this, but people maybe need to hear this more than once, and maybe have presented it in several different ways so that it clicks. But the ego trap and the pleasure trap are literally an unnatural, devilish combination of a yin and yang here with respect to how it is that we can engineer self-destructive behavior. So in order to neutralize those, it requires a wise strategy of excellence but not perfection. And if we can't reach excellence early, then our job is to reach good. Okay, so first we get to good, which is we get the basics quite good. And this is what the check sheet of Starch Targets and the webinar, The Slow Fast Way, is all about.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lisle, and I agree with you. Some of this information has to be presented numerously, many times, and so I encourage people. So I think we have some new attendees here that are not aware that you and I have done many webinars. They're all on Dr. McDougall's website, and they're free. Please go watch them. I think you'll have just about every question answered by watching so many of these webinars. And we've gone over a little, almost actually a lot. So we'll finish here today. But I do keep the questions. So when we have another session with you, Dr. Lisle, I will ask the questions that we didn't get to today.
Yes.
And again, thank you. From me and from everybody here, they are saying that this was one of the best webinars they've ever watched. So thank you.
Terrific. It's great, Gustavo. I'm glad you're enjoying Argentina, and good to see your mom again. And I'm just glad you're enjoying things, but we'll be glad to get you back over here too.
Yeah, yes. All right. Well, thank you again. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.